Now, how do we strike a balance between education, or rather the level of education, leadership, and governance in this country? Now, that forms the basis of our conversation here today on another classic episode of the Candy Talk. As usual, I'm joined by the one and only renowned speaker and political commentator here, University Don himself, Professor Herman Manyora. Prof, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's been...
Thank you, Okinyi.
Of course, that's my name, Evans
Yes.
Okinyi.
Evans Okinyi. Yes.
It's been a while, but we are here now.
We are
I
here,
want
yes.
us to understand the concept of leadership, level of education, and governance. Let's strike a balance there and see where are we headed as a country, or where does this fit in our country. Now, recently, as you can recall very well, the issue of degree caused a lot of uproar before the elections, and a number of people were being termed as unqualified, or rather some had or they were purported to be having fake degrees or something of the sort. But one thing that I've realized is that recently there was a High Court judgment that actually scrapped off the degree requirement for governors, position that in this country for a governor, for one to become a governor, you must not have a degree. Now, let's get here in the first place. Why do you think that this requirement of a degree, or rather level of education or literacy for that matter, is important in governance?
I think the Constitution just talks about the requirements and along the line a degree was made one of the requirements, I think by an act of parliament or something like that. The courts have found that it's not necessary that you have a degree. We give it to the courts. They are our interpreters. That's the role we have given them. So we can rest that there. The question then would be, is it necessary for somebody to have a degree?
And that's what we are wondering tonight. Is it necessary for one to have a degree?
It's very complex. It's not a question you can have a direct answer to. That yes, you need a degree, or no, you don't need it. It's very difficult. I think these things are determined by circumstances. For leadership, there is a school of thought that leaders are born and not made.
I've also heard that leaders are born.
But the others argue, no, you can have the potential, but like a machete or a panga, you need to be sharpened to work well. And that education is that force that sharpens you. There are also those who believe that in order for somebody to be a good leader, he needs to have education. Because education prepares you to handle certain situations, which unless you are prepared, you cannot handle. That is basically from people's thinking, schools of thought, from books on management and leadership. But what do you find in the world? See, that's why it is difficult to understand. Of the 15 or so American presidents, almost half never had education, university education, what Americans call college education. Of the many discoveries and inventions and the big feats and achievement in the world, many have been from men who never went to school, or at least had barely formal education. The examples that come to mind quickly are these gurus in the IT sector. Steve Jobs, Microsoft
Jobs.
Guys, what do you call him?
The Microsoft
Bill Gates.
guy, Bill Gates. Yeah,
All these fellows who have made billionaires, who have made billions, they never quite completed education.
But here we are in this country, Prof, and that's why I'm
looking at it from a global perspective, so that now you can ask your questions about this country. Now go ahead.
Now, my question is, how necessary or how relevant is education, qualification, or rather degree for that matter? How relevant is it to the leadership of Kenya as a whole, and perhaps the leadership of Africa as a continent? Do we see a situation whereby education can be used perhaps to as something that could propel us, and perhaps we could see some sort of good governance? Because
I think it is still a very difficult question. One, when you talk of education in this country, you are basically talking about papers, certificates. So to demand of people to have education when it turns out you mean they should have certificates, it's not even very useful. You know, I work in the education industry, in the sector in which I work, so I would understand a few things. Many of the people you see around giving you, showing the papers they have and titles, if you sit with them, they are basically useless. For two reasons. One, we were beaten by the bug, the disease of what was called the diploma disease. Everybody wanted their child to have a degree or a certificate. Secondly, our education system does not seem to produce people you can say are educated. So either way, education may not be as useful. However, there is so much you can't do unless you're educated. So you see, I would therefore think it might be necessary for us to say, for you to be a leader of a certain caliber, you need to have a university education. But we should be good enough to make exceptions. I think that might be the compromise. A general requirement for a degree, but room for exception of people like Sakaja. You know, if you look at Sakaja, he's an exceptional chap. You know, what I didn't like about Sakaja is those stories of forging a degree. But that's an intelligent man. I mean, you can't put here a PhD holder, an average PhD holder, and Sakaja, and you think that PhD holder can, on the basis of the PhD alone, be better than Sakaja. So we would need to make exceptions to people. Now, how that will be challenging. How do you go about it?
How do you go about
those are the details.
How do you go about making these exceptions?
Those are details. But again, you might just decide. Why then don't let just people fight it out, whether they have degrees or not?
My question, first of all, is this, Prof. Do you agree with the High Court's ruling, the one that was done by Anthony Mrima, the one that actually said that this article that requires governors to have degrees is unconstitutional and should not be there in the first place? Do you agree with him?
No, I don't. I don't agree.
Based on his argument,
I don't agree. What I would have hoped the courts would do would ask Parliament to review. Because it is there, review, and because in light of like what I'm saying, what do you call a degree in this country? What do we call education in this country? You can block somebody as good, and I'm giving you an example. People like Moi never had a university education. But you look, they were able to rule for 24 years. People like Sakaja, if they have or they don't have, I'm saying. And there are others. People like Sonko.
And that is...
Even before they got these degrees they got the other day.
That is where...
They have their own abilities. People like Joho, even before they got the so-called degrees, with all the things and shenanigans surrounding. So, I would think the High Court, what the High Court or the judiciary would have done is to demand, is to advise the legislature to do away with those requirements and explain why, in the manner in which I'm explaining. That according to Manyora, for example, that requirement serves no purpose. It serves no purpose.
It serves no purpose. Now, Prof, my question is this. For the members of Parliament, definitely, one of the reasons as to why this requirement was brought in is that it was supposed to promote proper legislation. We want to have leaders who can actually express themselves in the National Assembly. We have people right now, people who cannot even... you saw the kind of drama that we had during the swearing in. Somebody cannot even read something that is already written. How are you going to expect this person to legislate on behalf of the people? How are you going to expect this person to talk on behalf of the constituents? Yeah?
You see, this is a big challenge, a big problem. It's a question of who do Kenyans consider to be a leader? Unless you sort out that problem, Kenyans consider a leader to be a person who dishes money. So to the extent that some of those people have been development conscious, contributing to noble causes, to Harambee and so on, and giving money, then to Kenyans also a leader. So you must start by asking ourselves, how do we identify our leaders? It's not a question of making degrees requirement. No. Let's find out, how do we identify leaders? Every society always faces the challenge of how do they identify their leader. Even traditional societies. A society that was continuously at war identified the best warriors as their leaders. You see, the best generals. a country or a kingdom or a chiefdom that had challenges with rainfall, identify the rainmaker or the medicine man. So we have failed to look for a way of identifying leaders. And the answer I have always given this country is to outlaw fundraising. Let there be no Arambe in this country. Then people begin to look at other ways of looking for leaders. And that's how your education now can come in. Secondly, Evans, if you want to have good leaders in the National Assembly, dawa ni moja tu. Remove money from there. Remove money from Parliament. Remove entitlement from Parliament. Break that thing called Parliamentary Service Commission, a body that sets salaries for people, set their own salaries. It never works like that anywhere in the world. Vunja hiyo kitu. Give MPs 250, 300,000 shillings. Kwisha. No sitting allowance, nothing. You know what will happen? Only the people who want to serve this country will go there. And that's how your educated people will get there. But so long as Parliament is a place from where somebody... Those guys who entered Parliament the other day, Evans, they are already driving... You just go into a showroom and walk out with a 20 million shilling around there. It's a grant for you. You walk out with a car. These guys, some of them, these villagers, you've seen them, they're unable to speak. They are already driving Prados, V8. Secondly, all those MPs you see, those who were sworn in the other day, including those who can't speak, already have a mortgage of millions of shillings. They're already buying houses. So if you remove all those things from Parliament, give them realistic salaries, remove sitting allowances, all these guys will not compete for Parliament. Now, Parliament will be a place for people with education and who want to serve their country. Yes.
Definitely. No, that's of course. I was wondering, why is it that a number of youth outside here, people were learned actually, whenever they go to apply for any job in the job market, there are requirements that are needed. Yeah. And in fact, the degree is one of them. And of course, I remember even here where we are at Nairobi Review at Herman Manyora, everybody here is a degree holder.
Yes.
And like, so you're wondering, why is it that this requirement is just imposed on the common wananchi, but then those people whom we look up to as and point to as leaders, people who we think can reason, then definitely, because I think that education at times do shape your way of reasoning, and you better reason from an informed point of view.
But you know, first of all, a degree requirement for a job is different from a degree requirement for a leadership. If you are going to be a doctor, surely you must be a trained doctor. You must have a degree in medicine. If you want to be a journalist, surely like you must have the education for a journalist. That's different. Now, for leadership, there is the answer. Leaders have a different set of laws for themselves and another set of laws for those jails in this country. Do big people go to those jails? Those prisons? Those prisons are for small people like you and I. Have you heard a big man has gone to jail? And if they go there one day, they're out. So even for this leadership, the requirements, they will place very serious requirement on the common people, but place minimal, if any, requirements on themselves. It's a normal thing across the world where those who lead make laws that favor them in order to govern those they lead. And in order to govern those people, the laws must be heavy on those people. And the prisons must be for those people. Yes.
And for me, I think what the government is doing, or rather what the parliament is doing, or rather what these people are actually doing of making sure that that requirement is abolished is some sort of a kind of a mockery to the education system in this country. And definitely, I think it will lead us down the wrong way.
The leaders of the country and the judiciary, that judge, must know what he has done. Anytime you pronounce something that's a bearing on the public, whether you are the executive, the president, or the legislature parliament, this time I talk of my friend Moses Wetangula, or you are the judiciary, you must know something that has a bearing on it. You must handle it with care. What are you telling Kenyans? That's what are you telling your own children if you are a judge? What are you telling your own grandchildren? That message is so powerful, the judge may not know what he was doing. He may not know what. That's why I said, Even if he thought it was the right thing to do, he should have approached the parliament through an advisory. That going forward, this requirement seems to be discriminatory. Can you do something about it? And when the legislature is handling it, it also doesn't handle it carelessly. Even in the course of the discussions in parliament, you have people there who can debate, who can say some of the things I've told you, who would say a degree is a very important thing, but it may lock out capable leaders. For that reason, we are reluctantly removing it.
Why don't those?
So no, you must know how to.
Why don't those capable leaders just go to school and have the degrees as well?
No, it's okay. Sometimes you don't. It's not always easy to have a degree. If you're an old man, how tells you to go to class with children? I teach at the university. Sometimes I can see how uncomfortable some old men are there, with young boys around you talking some funny English. Us guys. Then you find an old woman has begun talking and dressing like children. Not everybody is ready to go through that. Correct.
Well, but of course, as you know very well, the judge said that that kind of revocation to that article will take place, or rather will take effect in the year 2027. Definitely, I'm waiting to see the kind of, or the crop of leaders that we'll have in the year 2027, especially the governors, owing to the fact that that kind of degree requirement will have been abolished by then, because it will not be effective. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. And of course, I think that's a very good, important point to wrap up this conversation. But always, as we say, do not fail to subscribe to our channel here. We are praying that you subscribe to our channel at Herman Manyora, and of course at Let's Talk Love Kenya. Until we have this conversation again, have yourself a very lovely day. I've been your host, Evans Okinyi.